to breaking the grade.
Sher Downing has been a successful business owner for over 2 decades. She is the go-to in the EdTech space for strategy, consulting, operations expertise, keynote addresses, and she is a wealth of information via her podcast, EdTech Speaks. But this entrepreneur is actually able to trace much of what she does today in business to her days helping to run a small mom and pop music store in a small town in Illinois. By listening to our show today about this music lover and mega EdTech strategist, you'll learn about how Sher got her first job at that music store and what skills she is still using today in her consulting business. How and why Sher was able to climb her career ladder from the music store way on up, and what almost broke her along the way. And she will tell us the latest and greatest on relationship building, technology, and much more in the education space. Breakers band together for some music to your ears as we speak to this rock star, Sher Downing. Sher, John, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, thanks.
Hey, great to see you, Sher.
John, you're a rock star in your own right. So tell us all about you, and then we're going to really talk to the real rock star and Sher.
Maybe a rock star in my own mind. So I'm John Gamm. I'm the entrepreneur in residence at Penn's Graduate School of Education, where I oversee programming to advance impact, innovation, and equity in worldwide education. We do it through a continuum of programming, boot camps, meetups, webinars, and our signature program, the Milken Penn GSE Business Plan Competition, which is coming up on its 14th year.
Awesome stuff. John is a rock star. Sher, you're a rock star too, and really happy to have you. When we got a chance to kind of dig in our pre-show and talk about the music store, that was just so cool. So we're gonna talk music and music stores and even band. But let's take it back to high school for you, and that teacher that really must have said this in a very diplomatic way. That you like to get into messy situations. Is that true?
It is. It is. I had a great teacher, took a couple classes from him. He's just one of those people who I think always was there for the kids that were not, the straight path, the normal kind of what you envision. And he said to me one day, because I'd worked on a couple different projects, you volunteer for committees and stuff. And he just looked at me and he said, you always manage to just pick and be driven towards that messy situation, but you make it work. And I started laughing because I've always kind of heard some form of that my entire life. And I said, well, I don't know, somebody has to do it. And he goes, no. He's like, what I'm saying is keep doing that. He's like, it will make a difference as you go forward. And he's like, so don't let anybody tell you not to head towards that or to do it. Just do it. And I've never forgotten that all these years later. And believe me, it's been a long time now since high school. But I have always been drawn. I told you, moth to flame kind of individual, which in the tech industry and in the ed tech industry, in education and online and the whole emergence, just became the perfect space for me because everything was new and everything was a problem and everything was unbuilt. And people ran and I went, ooh, this looks fun. Let's do this for the next 25 years.
John, are you moth to flame? What are you?
Well, as I was looking at the show notes and thinking about this segment, this also struck me in terms of, turning lemons into lemonade, if you will, and having lessons learned from way back in high school, college, early career. And the same thing with me. I literally, when I'm advising clients and working with mentees, some of the lessons learned way back then are still applying today. I'll never forget when I was sort of on a pre-law track and I was working in a public defender's office. One of my mentors said, John, remember the rule: be interested, not interesting. And I still carry some of those mantras and some of those lessons learned and some of the the advice that was given to high school teachers and early mentors, even today in the work that we're doing in this brave new world of EdTech. So absolutely related to that story, Cher.
Well, take us. So we're in a brave new world today, and it sounds like in the 1990s, it was in a braver, newer world. Cher, can you kind of talk to us about what the opportunity uh, was like back in the 90s when it came to the space that we're in?
Oh, so EdTech then was just starting. We called it distance education, and we were thinking we were really, top of notch by mailing exams through the postal system and having people take them with a proctor and then mailing them back. This was distance education at its finest. And then the World Wide Web came about, the internet. And people started talking about, is there a way we can deliver education on that? So I was fortunate enough when I started my career to be in the right place at the right time, be offered the opportunity and take it because nobody else wanted to, and figure out how do we make this work. So I was fortunate enough. I jokingly tell people I grew up with all the big tech out there that is available now because at that point they were betas and version one.
Hmm.
And so, we were fortunate enough to be kind of a trial space for these places, help them learn, help them grow, how to get to where they are today. But many of us across the nation were just at the beginning of this cusp and just trying to get it figured out. I remember we had students come to campuses at that time to take their online classes because internet wasn't available at home yet. This is back in the days of dial-up. You heard that lovely little sound and cranking, and you could go make an entire sandwich and come back, and you still weren't connected. So many people didn't have that at home yet. It was too expensive. They didn't have access, so they just drive somewhere to do it. So
Hmm.
seeing it come from that to where we are now, it's just been so exciting, and I think that's why the more that it grew and the more situations that came up, the more that I just felt like there was a problem to be solved. And I bet John is probably kind of the same way. Even now, where we have so much in high tech, new industrial revolution, um, there's still always something to fix. There's still always something to be challenged by. And that's what makes it so exciting.
So is this a good time to share that one of my favorite movies is You've Got Mail?
Yes, mine as well.
Oh
Mine as
gosh.
well.
Are you calling me a dinosaur, Cher? No, I am absolutely with you. Actually, the late '90s is when I started getting really mid to late '90s into this crazy world of ed tech. It's when Blackboard was founded, one of the first
Hmm.
unicorns. A learning management system was being developed at that time, and like you, Cher, I was starting to apply some of the lessons learned from Bill Gross's Idea Lab to come up with a ed
Yep.
tech specific incubator model, and we actually created a specific framework called BEST: Business Planning, Enterprise Development, System Specifications, and Tactical Implementation, to think of creative ways to disrupt the education space through digital technology. So a lot of lessons learned back then and a lot of stories we could share, and I could relate to that story very much.
So share the in the metaphor, the internet was kind of the flame for you
Yep. Definitely.
and allowed you to risk take. Where
Hmm.
were you doing your risk taking specifically as you were climbing the ladder?
Absolutely. I had an opportunity to put 35 years in higher education. The last 25 specifically targeted and focused on online education, and that really was the opportunity. We didn't have specializations in those areas, and we didn't have people who came from other fields that had that that knowledge base. We were just getting started in it, and there was no wrong answer because nothing existed yet. We were actually a beta at my first institution for Blackboard, and it was a shell of what it is now. It was
Hmm.
basically put some things in here and people can access them. But they would ask us, for feedback. What would you like to see? What would you like to do? So we were helping companies build And all through my career, we've been helping companies build through feedback, through experience, and even just through dreaming. Gosh, I wish this, tool would do X. And suddenly companies would be like, oh, maybe, we've heard that 3 times now. Maybe that's something we need to do. So the risk was always you were able to speak your mind. You were able to say what was wrong with the product, what was right with the product, what the opportunities were. Um, you were able to talk to people in terms of their experience. I think, but also you were able to say, who wants to try this? Who wants to do something? And in education, it's hard because we're always very traditional. But the opportunity can be you could get done faster. You could take a quicker class. You could take a summer school class and get ahead. So there's always a carrot for students, right? There's always something that's intriguing for them. For faculty, it's a matter of how do they do things differently? How do they reach a new audience? And so by combining that risk taking with dangling of carrots, you suddenly now have that perfect storm to start to build things and to move things forward.
Music to your ears, John.
Yeah, it really is. Again, relate to it so much, and also the power of storytelling.
Hmm.
You mentioned in terms of finding a need and thinking about a way to disrupt the education space, but also having a respect for the fact that the education space, whether it's pre-K 12 or higher ed, tends to work at a snail's pace. We call it the glacial pace by which the education space moves. So you have this sort of dichotomy of entrepreneurs and founders who want to go fast, want to innovate, but also having to respect the dynamics of the industry, which tends to not adapt to change very quickly. Of course, until the pandemic, which was an opportunity where it forced everybody to change fast. And like we say at Penn's Graduate School of Education, never let a crisis go to waste. And the amount of
Right.
transformation that's taken place since the pandemic has been absolutely unbelievable, and we're now seeing sort of a new stage or a new era of transformation and disruption in the education space that I hope will open new opportunities to deliver and support student success ultimately.
John, these are the moments where I
Absolutely.
realize that we are very much in sync because I was going to bring up the elephant in the room of the pandemic, and but you brought it up, so awesome there. Before we switch over to your actual consulting business, maybe some tactical advice here for people in the job world. You are moth to flame, like to take risks, but you also seem like a really nice, cool person. So, but you
Thank
wanted
you.
to climb the ladder, so how do you climb the ladder the right way while still taking the risks that you need to? You've obviously you have, maybe it's not a formula, but you could at least be an example for others of how you did this while maintaining your desire to take risk and be a moth to a flame.
Sure. So I always tell people I'm a product of the 80s. And in the 80s, if you remember, this was the Wall Street era. Your job was to get through college, climb that ladder, go as high as you could go, earn as much as you could earn. It didn't matter what field you were in. It was just we were all very driven in the 80s. And that's what we were taught. That's what that defines success in your life. Obviously, now we're looking at success in a different way. We're looking at work lifestyle balance and all of these other things. But at that time, that's really what you were supposed to do. And think about the fact that when you're in a job and people are saying to you, you should be looking at this, you should moving up into this role. Have you seen this is coming? So you're always getting it from all directions at that point in time. And John probably remembers this. You were barely in a role and somebody would say to you, oh, have you thought about doing this next? And you're thinking, wow, I haven't even learned this part yet, but okay. That was just the mentality. So you had to be always looking for opportunity. And that's one thing I always tell mentees, and even in a startup. When you're in a startup, you usually get brought in because you're in one role, but that doesn't mean you can't have opportunities in doing other things within that startup. So you need to look at opportunities. When you're a moth to flame person, then what's not being done because somebody doesn't want to do it. But the ultimate core of all of this is relationships, building relationships with the people that you work with, understanding the organization and starting to build relationships with people that are outside of maybe your core space. Understanding the industry. How are you building relationships outside of there? Nowadays, it's very simple. You can build LinkedIn accounts, you can start to connect with people and do virtual networking and such. But back then, it was all handshakes and business cards and going to conferences.
Right.
So many people go to a conference and they don't talk to anyone. They don't attend, networking situations. They just go to those sessions they wanted to go to, and they go back to the hotel. That's a key time to meet people, to talk to people, to find commonalities. Do your homework ahead of time. Look at the list of people or the vendors that are going to be there. Who do you connect with? Because you have a similar background. John and I are finding out today we have a similar background. So that's a perfect time to connect with him after this and say, hey, we should talk more. Let's see where we're going. Let's see what opportunities we can do to connect others with us. But it's really all about building up that relationship with people, taking your past experiences, pulling together that real opportunity now to take advantage of the technology that will help you do that. But then also really look at what's coming, what's down the pike, what's going to be there. I'm a huge reader every day of multiple newspapers, articles, etc. Because when I see that one little mention of somebody's thinking of starting a company, or somebody's thinking of starting a product, or somebody's thinking that this is going to change education, those are the things that define what's coming next. And that's what I want to watch for. And that's where I want to be ahead of the game and knowledgeable in it, so that when I work with potential clients, when I mentor students, when I mentor EdTech, that I understand and I know what's already out there. So you have to do a lot of personal homework, I call it, to keep yourself prepared, to keep yourself out there. I just posted an article this morning about called "It's Not Always a Wonderful Life: The Layoffs of the Tech
Mm.
Company." And what I talk about is, how do you prepare yourself? What define what you want in your next role. Take a look in so that you know where you're going. And for tech companies, look at doing more contract workers. We want to see how we can build a workforce differently. So though that article came as a result of things in the last 2 weeks that have been coming out in the news, people I've been talking to, people I know that got laid off. All of these things start to come together.
Right.
So, relationships, doing your own personal homework, making sure your skill set is up there. These are all things that really define where you go and how you're going to do it. And then take the risk. I know there are lots of people that don't like to take risks. I know they like that safe space. Safe space doesn't move. Risk space moves. And that's where you really have to step in and just say to yourself, I could fail, and that's okay. But if I don't try at all, I'm never going to move forward.
And the personal homework, I'd be remiss if I didn't point this out, and coming from my notes, you've been doing that personal homework since the record store, right?
Yep,
Since the music store, because you were telling me that you had to kind of be ahead of the game on music. So when people came in and they said, I just heard this song, I'm like, it's right here, right? So just for a
exactly.
moment, let's go back to the record store, the music store, and then we'll fast forward into Downing Ed Tech Consulting.
And Sher, I'm gonna step in. You had me at a product of the '80s, and we are gonna connect. What we're gonna connect on offline is Guns N' Roses, Queen, Motorhead, Foreigner, Bon Jovi, and Journey.
There we
Because
go.
I want to hear this story as well. That's where we're gonna connect. Josh is too young
So
for all of that.
I knew you
know,
were going to say that. I'm going to step in. I knew you were going to say that, John. I have down here in Mexico a 2010 Ford Escape, and a buddy came to visit, and I said, "This is going to sound weird, dude. Do you have CDs?" And he's like, "I absolutely have CDs." He brought a bunch of CDs, and one of them is Journey. So me, my wife, our kid, have been listening to Journey's greatest hits. Your turn,
nice.
Cher.
I love it. I love it. Oh well,
Personal
yeah,
homework in the record business.
personal homework. So worked in a music store. and I was a high school kid, but Josh and I talked about this the other day. So one of the things that was really important was we did all sorts of things in terms of music. We actually had physical pianos and organs and instruments that people rented and purchased and wanted in their homes. We had a whole arm of people that taught lessons. So you had kids coming in and out every day learning things. And then we sold music. And this is back in the day when you bought sheet music. Um, and so the thing that I told Josh that was so interesting was we were trained that you had to be customer service oriented to anyone, no matter what they looked like, who they were. And again, remember, this is the early 80s. There was a lot less people that looked different than they do nowadays.
Hmm.
So you could have someone come in who was a reverend or a pastor looking for music for Sunday service. And right after that, you could have someone who came in who played in a local band, who had long hair and tattoos, wearing a leather vest, looking for sheet music because they heard something on the radio and they know people are going to start requesting it. You didn't know who was going to come in. You could have somebody's mom come in who heard a song on the car radio and would just hum a few bars, tell you it sounded like someone. Maybe they went to a movie on Saturday and they heard this song and they want it for their wedding. You had to know what all that was. You had to have some idea. So you had to do your homework on listening to music on the radio, scouring the catalogs when they came out of what was being ordered in, understanding what people liked in all genres. It wasn't just rock and roll. It wasn't just jazz. It was everything. I remember when the movie Robin Hood came out. There's a song in there that's a lovely ballad. Um, Everyone wanted it at their wedding that year. Everyone.
And I think I
And
danced to that in middle school. I know exactly the song you're
probably,
talking about.
probably, yep. And you had to have enough copies in because it was a last minute. You could be getting married on Saturday, and today you decided, oh my God, I just heard that on the radio. We have to have that song.
Hmm.
Someone would come flying in and be like, yeah, we need a copy of that. So, you learned very early on that you had to work with everybody. You had to understand everybody. You had to stay ahead of everybody in terms of what was going on, what was being popular, what was next, new movies that were coming out, what their musical scores were going to be like. And all of that, it's ironic. All of that are things I still do now, which is understanding what that client, that end user, that consumer might be asking about, might be looking for based on what's coming out in the news, what they're hearing, what they're seeing. Um, and so that was a really good training ground for me, unbeknownst to me at the time.
Right.
But it was also a nice, risky space because you could order in something on the hopes people were going to buy it. You didn't really know. You just kind of had to sell it to the boss that, I think this is going to be popular. I think we need more copies. I think we need this, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And we would always talk about why it didn't and what we could do different. But, I think for everyone, when you're in high school working somewhere, even when you feel like it's the most mundane job, there's always things that you're trained and you learn about. And if you hang on to those things and if you talk with people about their experience with you in those roles, suddenly you really have a toolkit that carries forward. And it's funny when I think about it now, because it's 40 years, 40 plus years since I started that role. Um, and it's still with me. I still have memories of things, and I still have memories of failures and of good things that happened and of lessons learned. And it, affects how I deal with things now.
40 years ago, my first kiss under the skating rink, under the bleachers, Closer to the Heart by Rush.
Geez, man, you're really sharing it all today.
Love
You've
it.
got
I
mail,
love
first
it.
kiss. Anything else you want to tell us?
Man, she brought me back with the 40 years.
I was just going to ask you what your first job was, not your first kiss.
Hey, this is about breaking the grade.
Breaking hearts.
Breaking hearts, Closer to the Heart, Rush.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we could go on and on and on. It's interesting. I wanted to share that we talk about CDs and we talk about, again, music disruption, and then we go right to streaming and we think of iTunes. And we think But I love to. I haven't shared this story with you, Josh, but MP3, right? The music,
Yep.
back in the day, in terms of how music was digitized and how music was stored. I actually worked with a partner who was one of the founders of MP3. And there's an interesting story. Who, by the way, we later sold our company to Blackboard, which is all part of
Yep.
this EdTech journey. But I said, Robin, how did you get MP3.com? And he said, "Oh, this is a great story. And you'll both like this in terms of breaking the grade." Because he said, Michael Paul III was this guy who had a family picture album on the internet, Michael Paul, and it was MP3. So I went to him and I said, "I really need this URL MP3 because I'm building this business, the whole MP3 movement. Please sell it." And the guy said, "I am never going to sell you my URL because I have this incredible library of family photos on the internet." And Robin went to him and just pestered him. "I need the URL." And he said, "I am never going to sell you MP3. I don't know what." And finally, Robin called him. It was like the 20th time and said, "What's it going to take?" And the guy said, "All right, it's going to cost you $500."
Yeah.
So MP3 was purchased. MP3 became
Ooh.
MP3. By the way, Lars Ulrich, right? The whole story.
Yep.
And thankfully, Robin went back to Michael Paul III when it was all said and done and stroked him a check for $250,000 and said, "Oh man, I got that URL for that price. Here you go. I want you to participate in my exit." So that's the story of MP3. And
By
here
the
we
And
are.
there's
way,
a lot of those. There's a
A
lot of
lot of
those
those
from that
stories.
time. A lot of those betas that we did, that we worked on, that even some that we just thought, wow, this is not going anywhere, got bought up, got moved around, got rethought. We were just joking the other day about the fact that you used to make a cassette tape, um, of all your favorite songs. And you just, I mean, now it was illegal then, but now they actually persecute you for it. Back then, everybody was doing it, so nobody thought too much of it. But you would just record all your favorite songs and put them onto a cassette tape. And now we pay to stream. It's fine to own it, a copy of it. But then we just made it happen, and we used it in courses. We joke about now the intellectual property that we broke in the early days because we didn't know any better. We'd have an online class and we just shove it full of everything, cartoons, pictures, everything. Now we know that there's a responsibility to digital media and for people to get back what is theirs, rightfully. But it was the wild west of online at that time.
Yeah. Josh would kill me if I didn't bring this all back. So, talking about your work now with EdTech and education entrepreneurs, um, I've seen some of your convictions, and they align very much with mine. I like when I'm working with my mentees not to impart my knowledge based on all these incredible lessons learned and experiences under the skating rink bleachers, but actually pushing forward and really thinking about how we kind of come up with collisions, having entrepreneurs kind of run into people and run into their own experiences so that they can be part of this whole digital disruption in education. But Sher, what are some of your convictions? What are some of the things that you're seeing in education and ed tech, even post pandemic, that is really driving transformation and will lead to ultimately to student success? What are you seeing out there?
I'm starting to see trickles, and I hope that we see more of it. But we are finally understanding that we need to find out what the student wants. We have always professed to doing what the student wants, but we've not really been very good at it. We've done a cursory job of it, I think, over the years. But now we are seeing, for example, students like hybrid, not because they don't have to walk to class or they don't have to show up somewhere, but because they can learn at their own pace and their own style at home or wherever they're living in the foundational materials. And then when they go to a class or they do a meetup online, they're actually having really in depth conversations. They're actually really getting through the material and talking about the possibilities of it instead of trying to do both all at once. So I'm seeing where we're starting to shift a little bit in terms of how we offer things, how people access what they can do outside of the meeting in terms of what they can do in the meeting. I think that is going to only grow. I think we're going to see a real revelation in the fact that the reason people often don't finish school is because it doesn't fit them. And I talked to Josh about this. So I said I was one of those kids that if I loved a subject matter, boy, I was immersed. I was all in. If I didn't love it and you told me it was a core class that I had to take, yeah, I squeaked through. I had no interest in it, which is why when I went to graduate school, all of a sudden there was this whole world of talking about only the things that I was interested in. I had chosen to do that path. There's a lot of us out there that learn that way. We don't learn well when it's not presented to us in a format that we enjoy or we comprehend well. It's a lot of times where if we are adult learners and we have so many other things going on, we're trying to squeeze learning in. We can't fit into a traditional calendar. But I think even more so, we want time to think through the process. We want time to have consideration. Where that goes into a larger transformation is this is also how we do product development. When you think about it, we push something out, and if five people say they like it, we go, hey, we got something. And if five people say they hate it, we're like, let's go back to the drawing board, figure something else out. We are rapid response. We are focused on creating that widget that everyone loves. But we don't do that in education. We say, here's the path. Here's you have to just work towards the widget. We don't care if you like it or dislike it. Everyone's going towards the widget. My hope is that our rapid response and our ability of what we do in startups and our mentoring of people can move over and allow students the opportunity to grow and to shift. We're seeing it in schools like Penn, Stanford, places that originally had incubators, but the incubators now spilling over into the learning circle. And I think that's where we're going to gain the most value. And that's where we're going to then impact where the society is going, how we learn, how we move through things, what we use. It's exciting if we can get education and accreditation bodies to shift their focus. We really will have the perfect storm over the next 25 years for those young students now to be our next level of innovators coming forward.
Yeah, and before Josh kind of wraps this up, I want to just say that aligns with the research that we're doing at Penn's Graduate School of Education. That conviction that student-centered learning and thinking about the engaging nature of the applications, the content, what we're teaching is so critically important. We're doing a lot of research on what works in education and in education technology and digital learning. And it comes down to what you just said. First, it's engaging. It has to be fun for the students, for them to want to learn. Two, it has to be pedagogically aligned so that there's an actual learning outcome that happens as a result. And three is it's got to be easy to adopt. So if you can't implement it in the classroom and it doesn't align with your typical instructional episode, got no chance. Those who are kind of doing that triple threat, 3 for 3, are the ones that we're seeing are not only transforming or disrupting, but actually having success with being more investable, sustainable, and ultimately scalable on that path to unicorn status. It's crazy that since 1999, as we've talked about this, that we've only seen 30 some odd unicorns go from $0 to $1 billion in value. But we've seen, I think, 23 of them happen in the last couple of quarters. And that to me brings hope to the market and shows that if we keep focusing on the student, the learner, we're really going to be able to transform, disrupt, and ultimately be able to lead to things that are going to have an impact for college and career readiness. So totally aligned with all of those convictions, Sher.
When we decided to have Sher on the show, I was like, I know that her and John are going to hit it off. Little did I know we'd find out about John's first kiss.
That Sher likes mail. Rush and the Cars.
Yeah. That I drive a car where we play CDs in it. If you've got CDs, send them south. We are still playing them here in Old Mexico. My kid is really learning the lyrics to Jimmy Buffett's Songs You Know by Heart, which is a CD we found in this house. We'll move her to Journey. So This was a really cool connection. I hope the audience connects with it, and just kind of a trip down memory lane, from record stores in small towns to the beginning of in the 90s when EdTech got going, to now. And, we'll continue the conversation. I can only imagine, Sher, what you're going to learn from John. Just feel free to back channel with me. And John, by the way, I did know that story of the MP3, but I certainly didn't want to. Of course, come on, Uncle, Grandpa John. I didn't want to interrupt you. I love the story anyway. So Sher, thanks for joining us, seriously, and playing along and having fun and everything you're doing for the industry. We appreciate it.
Let's collaborate and let this be a to be continued. I really, really appreciated this segment.
I'm in. Just tell me when.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening, Breakers.